The royal scandal that shaped history. In the quiet of a cold and dark evening in 1314, Isabella, the daughter of King Philip IV of France, found herself at the center of a royal secret, a secret that would eventually change the course of history. Standing before her father, she whispered words that would send shockwaves through the royal family, shaking the very foundation of French power. "My brothers' wives are being unfaithful to them," she said, her voice a mix of anger and betrayal. These words, uttered in the quiet shadows of the royal court, were not just about a personal grievance. They were about the very fate of the French throne. King Philip III, the powerful ruler of France, had spent his life building political alliances to secure his family's rule. He had arranged marriages between his children and the royal families of Europe, hoping to solidify his kingdom's position among the powers of the continent. Isabella had been married to King Edward II of England, a union meant to settle territorial disputes between the two kingdoms. Her brothers, Louis and Charles, had also made royal marriages, Louis to Margaret, the daughter of the Duke of Burgundy, and Charles to Blanche, the daughter of the Count of Burgundy. But Isabella's marriage was troubled, and in the depths of her frustration, she confided in her father. Historian Oscar Herodon tells us that the marriages of Isabella's brothers were equally strained. Louis and Margaret had a cold relationship, while Charles was in awe of his wife Blanche. But Isabella's marriage was the most troubled, often leaving her to seek solace and advice from her father, King Philip. In his book, Isabella, She-Wolf of France, Queen of England, Weir Ellison writes that Isabella often turned to her father for help, as her marriage with the English king had become more of a political alliance than a personal connection. But it wasn't just Isabella's troubled marriage that troubled her. It was the betrayal she had uncovered. In 1313, during a visit to Paris with her infant son, Isabella gifted her sisters-in-law, the wives of her brothers, embroidered purses. These small, delicate gifts, meant to be tokens of affection, would soon become the symbol of a scandal that would shake the French court. The following year, Isabella, returning to her home, noticed something unusual. Her sisters-in-law, accompanied by two knights, Philip and Gautier d'Aune, were seen carrying the very purses Isabella had given them. The sight of the embroidered purses in the hands of the knights, men loyal to her father's court, seemed to suggest something far more troubling. A secret, illicit relationship between the royal women and the knights. Isabella wasted no time informing her father, but the purses, though suspicious, were not enough to prove infidelity. In the royal courts of medieval Europe, a woman's gift to a knight could be seen as an expression of affection, not evidence of adultery. Still, King Philip was determined to uncover the truth. His authority and his family's rule depended on it. Philip of Forbes, never one to let a threat to his family's power go unchecked, ordered that his daughters-in-law and the knights be spied upon. It wasn't long before reports came back to the king. His daughters-in-law were meeting with the knights at the Tour de Nesle, a watchtower on the Seine River in central Paris. As tensions mounted, the scandal reached its climax in 1314. The two knights, once trusted men of the court, were arrested. After enduring torture, they confessed to their illicit relationships with the royal women. The confessions were damning, and the punishment was swift and brutal. The knights were executed in a horrific fashion, flayed, hanged, and quartered. The women, though not executed, were tried in the Paris Parliament, found guilty, and imprisoned. Their heads were shaved in disgrace, a mark of their dishonor. Blanche, Margaret, and Joan were punished in the harshest way imaginable. But the punishment didn't stop with them. The scandal that had erupted within the royal family would send shockwaves throughout Europe. King Philip, already reeling from the betrayal of his children, would soon face even more tumultuous times. The royal family, once secure in their grip on power, found themselves in a series of crises. When King Philip IV died later that same year, his 3 sons succeeded him, but their reigns were short-lived, and none of them left an heir. This sudden succession crisis led to political instability in France, and power struggles began to emerge among the French nobility. After Philip IV's death, his son Louis briefly ascended to the throne, but his reign was brief, and his wife Margaret died in captivity, raising suspicions that she had been poisoned. Soon after, Louis also died suddenly in 1316, and his young daughter Jo, who was meant to inherit the throne, faced doubts about her paternity. In the face of such uncertainty, the French aristocracy began to look elsewhere for leadership. The throne passed to Louis's brother, Philip, who took the throne as Philip V. He used the ancient Frankish Salic law to justify his claim, denying his niece, Joan, the right to rule. But Philip V himself would not live long, dying unexpectedly at a young age. His children too were all daughters, and with his death, the throne passed to his younger brother, Charles, in 1322. Charles's reign, too, was short-lived, and he died without a male heir. It was then that the throne was claimed by Philip of Valois, the cousin of Charles, setting the stage for the conflict that would define much of European history for the next century. As the throne of France changed hands, so did the nature of the conflict between France and England. The 100 Years' War, a brutal and protracted conflict, would soon erupt, sparked in part by the unresolved issues of succession and territorial disputes. The roots of this conflict stretch back to the Norman conquest of 1066, when William the Conqueror, a Duke of Normandy, took the throne of England. The Norman rulers of England became vassals of the French kings, and the ongoing struggles over land and power would eventually lead to the war. The 100 Years' War would rage on for over a century, its roots firmly planted in the royal betrayals, power struggles, and dynastic crises that began in the dark, cold days of 1314. The war would change the face of Europe, with lasting impacts on both France and England. It was not just a war for a throne. It was a struggle for power, for land, and for the legacy of the royal families of Europe. And while it would eventually come to an end in 1475 with the Treaty of Picquigny, the war would leave a deep scar on the landscape of Europe, reshaping nations and altering the course of history forever. The seeds of this conflict, however, were sown not just by kings and queens, but by the quiet, treacherous betrayal that began in the royal courts of France. It was a scandal that in its quiet whispers would alter the very destiny of nations, forever changing the balance of power in Europe and setting the stage for a century of warfare. The story of the royal scandal that led to the 100 Years' War is not just about betrayal and conflict. It is a reminder of how small, hidden moments in history can have far-reaching consequences, shaping the world in ways we may never fully understand.